Chapter 21, Section 2, The Growing Traditionalist-Modernist Divide. As the war ended and the doughboys began to come home from France, the title of a popular song asked a question that was troubling in many rural families. How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? After seeing the bright lights of cities, many returning soldiers decided to leave behind the small towns they came from. The 1920 census revealed a startling statistic. For the first time ever, the United States was more than 50% urban. This population shift set the stage for the growing divide between traditionalists and modernists. Urban attractions, economic opportunity, and personal freedom. During the 1920s, some 19 million people would move from farms to cities, largely in search of economic opportunities. Urban areas, with their factories and office buildings, were hubs of economic growth. As the economy boomed, the demand for workers increased. Wages rose as well. Between 1920 and 1929, the average per capita income rose 37%. At the same time, the Consumer Price Index, a measure of the cost of basic necessities such as food and housing, remained steady. As a result, urban wage earners saw their standard of living improve. Cities also offered freedom to explore new ways of thinking and living. City dwellers could meet people from different cultures, go to movies, visit museums, and attend concerts. They could buy and read an endless variety of magazines and newspapers. They could drink, gamble, or go on casual dates without being judged as immoral. Rural problems, falling crop prices, and failing farms. The personal freedom people experienced in cities stood in strong contrast to small-town life. In rural areas, most people lived in quiet communities where they watched out for one another. New ideas and ways of behaving were often viewed with suspicion. In addition to losing their younger generation to cities, rural communities faced other problems during the 1920s. Farmers had prospered during the war, producing food crops for the Allies and the home front. Enterprising farmers had taken out loans to buy new machines or extra land in hopes of increasing their output and profits. After the war, however, European demand for U.S. farm products dropped sharply, as did crop prices. With their incomes shrinking, large numbers of farmers could not repay their loans. Hundreds of thousands of farmers lost their farms in the early 1920s alone. For the rest of the decade, farmers' share of national income dropped steadily. By 1929, per capita income for farmers was less than half the national average. Congressmen from rural states tried to reverse this downward slide with farm-friendly legislation. The most ambitious of these measures, the McNary-Haugen Bill, was first introduced in 1924. This legislation called on the federal government to raise the price of some farm products by selling surplus crops overseas. Congress passed the bill twice, in 1927 and then in 1928. But President Calvin Coolidge vetoed it both times. A strong opponent of the government's interference in markets, the president dismissed the McNary-Haugen Bill as preposterous. Changing values lead to mutual resentment. The divide between urban modernists and rural traditionalists was not just economic. Modernists tended to view rural Americans as behind the times. Sinclair Lewis, the first American writer to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, mocked small-town values. In one of his novels, he described the residents of a small Midwestern town as a savorless people, gulping tasteless food, and sitting afterward coatless and thoughtless in rocking chairs, prickly with the same inane decorations, listening to mechanical music, saying mechanical things about the excellence of Ford automobiles, and viewing themselves as the greatest race in the world. Sinclair Lewis, Main Street, 1920. Rural traditionalists, not surprisingly, resented such attacks on their behavior and values. In their eyes, they were defending all that was good in American life. They saw the culture of the cities as money-grubbing, materialistic, and immoral. At the same time, however, many rural people could not help but envy the comfort and excitement of city life seemed to offer. The defenders of traditional values often looked to their faith and the Bible for support in their struggle against modernism. As a result, the 1920s saw a rise in religious fundamentalism, the idea that religious texts and beliefs should be taken literally and treated as the authority on appropriate behavior. Billy Sunday, a former Major League Baseball player, emerged as the most prominent fundamentalist preacher in the nation. His dramatic preaching style drew huge crowds. He was said to have preached to more than 100 million people in his lifetime. Sunday's largest following was in rural areas, including the South. There is 10 times more respect for God and the Bible and the Christian religion in the South, he said, than in any other part of the United States. Still, Times were changing. A growing number of young modernists who rejected long-accepted American values. Rural areas were losing population to the cities, and agriculture was no longer the backbone of the American economy. In addition, with improvements in mass media, country people themselves were being exposed to new ideas, music, and social values.